Hello again. So today I'm going to share with you a couple of really simple ways that I found to lessen my glucose spike and even potentially help decrease the amount of glucose that I absorbed. And these two things are paying attention to the order in which you eat your food and not eating naked carbohydrates. And let me tell you, these two little switch ups have had a pretty profound effect on my blood glucose spike. And so initially I discovered these just through trial and error, but it got me curious and it got me wondering if there was any actual research or science to back up what I was experiencing in my body and whether other people were actually experiencing a similar thing. So I did take a dive into the science, and yeah, they're really backed. There is quite a bit of research into both of those ways of lowering the amount of glucose absorbed and also lowering that spike and getting a nice kind of rolling hill rather than this sharp spike that we can get. So for those of you who don't know, I've been wearing a continuous glucose monitor on the back of my arm for the last 3 weeks now, and it's measuring my blood sugar 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, sending that information to my iPhone so I can see in real time exactly how my food choices and other lifestyle choices as well affecting my blood sugar, which we know is super important both for your short-term day-to-day health and the way that you will feel, but also very much in your long-term health and your ability to avoid chronic disease. So a lot of foods that we typically consider healthy can result in a really large glucose spike. For example, for me, strawberries were not good. Huge spike with strawberries. In fact, if I was comparing on my graph, the spike was as high as what it was when I ate cake. So other high spikers for me were things like grapes, sweet potatoes, white potatoes, corn, and porridge or oats. So, some of these foods have a lot of nutrients in them. We're not arguing that they are not good for you in some ways. They're beautiful plant foods, but when eaten in isolation, they tend to cause a really big glucose spike, which is what we are trying to avoid doing many times a day, every day of the week, month, year, for decades. That's when it's going to get us into real trouble with our long-term health prognosis. So what I found is when I balanced my meals and balanced foods that have high carbohydrates, I actually saw a much lower glucose response. So adding fat, fiber, and protein to a carbohydrate actually causes a more gentle rise in glucose. It slows down digestion. Fiber actually may decrease the amount of total glucose you even absorb from the food. Protein slows down digestion as well. So balancing those foods with other macronutrients and not eating naked carbohydrates is something that was really helpful for my blood glucose levels, but would obviously be the research showing us that will be helpful for a lot of other people as well. And I have seen evidence of this many times throughout the last 3 weeks. I had a birthday week the other week. It was loaded with birthdays, lots of birthdays in 1 week, which means lots of cake in 1 week. And I found that if I ate something before I dove into a piece of cake, if I ate some fat, protein, vegetable before I ate the cake, my glucose response was significantly lower. For example, one day there was a cheese platter out when there was cake, so I had a few pieces of brie and a couple of carrot sticks before I actually ate the cake, and my glucose response was significantly lower to the cake than what it was the previous day, where I'd actually eaten the same cake at around the same time, and I had had the same breakfast that morning. So I had a similar graph to compare it to. I've also tested out a couple of the same meals over a couple of times in the week. And when I ate vegetables first, protein and then the carbohydrates, which in this case was potatoes, my blood glucose for that meal was lower. Okay, so it's just down to the order in which you eat your food. Now, the research that I have followed suggests that putting those fibrous foods in first, so your vegetables, really create a good environment for you to not even absorb as much of the glucose from your foods, which you have later on in the meal. So it is as simple as vegetables first, okay, protein, and then having your carbohydrates, so your rice or your potatoes or whatever that may be with your meal. The same with fruit. I don't eat a great deal of fruit, but I tested an apple alone. And on another morning, I tested an apple with a really small serve of chia pudding and a little bit of Greek yogurt. And the glucose response to that apple under those circumstances was again significantly lower. So it's really about that double-pronged approach of not eating your carbohydrates without having some fiber, some protein, some fat around the same time or beforehand, and ordering the foods in which you do eat on your plate in that order. And it can make a significant difference to how your body responds. Next time I'm going to share a few other really simple things that I have learnt that I can do before and after my meals that are really making a real difference. And guys, these are such simple strategies we're talking about not even changing what you eat. We're just talking about the mindful practice of having the order in which you eat your foods change perhaps slightly, and also not diving into naked carbohydrates or really carbohydrate rich foods without perhaps eating some fiber, fat or protein first. So I hope that's helpful for someone, and I'll be back with more another time.